Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Great, we're all here. Excellent. So welcome, everyone, to the Put People First Candidates Forum, which is a part of a series of 13 forums statewide. My name is Sheila Linton, and I'm a member and leader of the Vermont Workers Center and Put People First campaign. I want to first start by acknowledging the many groups who helped host this event tonight. They include Vermont Workers Center, Put People First, and Healthcare is a Human Right campaigns, Migrant Justice, Vermont Early Educators United AFT, Vermont Center for Independent Living, Green Mountain Self-Advocates, Red Clover Climate Justice, 350 Vermont, Vermont AFL-CIO, United Professions of Vermont, Vermont Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals, AFT, Voices for Vermont's Children, Vermont Home Care Workers United, ASME, United Healthcare Workers East, SUIU. Thank you to all people who made tonight's forum possible. Let's give them a round of applause. So let's welcome the candidates that are here joining us this evening. This series of forums is for candidates for the Vermont Senate and the House of Representatives. We're very glad you are able to join us this evening for the People's Candidate Forum to hear the stories of problems and visions for solutions for our communities. Tonight we have with us, starting from my right, going left, we have Mike Moricki, Windham 4 District State Representative, Mary Kane, write-in candidate for Senate, Molly Burke, District 2 State Representative, Senator Jeanette White, Tristan Tolino, state candidate for State Rep District 3, Rep John Moran, Windham, Bennington, Rep David Dean, Connecticut River Watershed Council, and Ian Diamondstone, Liberty Union District 3 candidate. Let's give a warm welcome to our candidates. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate you taking your time out to be here tonight. Tonight's candidates will have a chance to hear about the Put People First campaign and a number of issues of concern to all of the organizations represented here tonight. They will have the opportunity to hear testimony from constituents who have been asked to share their stories as examples of issues that so many people are currently struggling with and how we believe that these issues our communities are struggling with are interconnected and that the solutions must be interconnected as well. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer questions about these solutions. We'll take questions from the audience at the end. In order to make sure we are able to take as many audience questions as possible, everyone should have a note card at your seat. And if you do not have, it should look like this, an index card or note card. If you do not have one, Ellen in the back of the room can give you one. So please feel free to raise your hand and she'll come by and give you one. Everyone also, please write your questions on the note cards and indicate which candidate or candidates the question is for. Because of time, we would like you to direct your question to a specific candidate if you can. Someone will be collecting the note cards towards the end of the event. That will be Ellen, who's in the red shirt, and Cindy, who's in the purple vest. They will be collecting the questions from the audience and will be giving them to myself as the moderator to ask those questions to the candidates and reps. So before we get started, I also wanted to say that you have a note-taking sheet in front of you. Both the individuals, the participants in the room, as well as the candidates, have a candidate's response notes. And this is for the candidates to keep track of sort of the questions that are going on, because we'll be asking questions that might be hard to sort of remember, as well as for you in the audience to be tracking what the candidates say. And then you can take that home with you and write down little notes of what they say, of yes or no, of how they respond to the issues that are at hand today. We will have timekeepers They'll make sure that we stay on schedule tonight and everyone has a chance to speak. In the front, we will hold signs up when you have 30 seconds left. So there will be individuals who will be testifying. There will be candidates who will be answering questions. We will allot a specific amount of time for those responses, and there will be somebody in the audience holding up a sign saying 30 seconds left or time is done to help you wrap up what you're saying. Okay, any questions? Okay, let's get started. So we're here today to tell you that we are a people's movement working to put people first and meet the needs of all of us. We realize that we must not be divided any longer, focus just on one set of issues that affect us most, but that we must come together with others who struggle to have their human rights fulfilled, that we must hold our government accountable for meeting our human needs and rights. So I would like to invite our first speaker up, who is going to testify. His name is Wyatt Andrews. He's from Halifax, and he's part of the Put People First campaign. Welcome, Wyatt.
Hi, my name is Wyatt Andrews. I'm a year out of college and am currently working full-time as a videographer for a small marketing company here in Brattleboro. I stand before you today not to tell you of all the hardships that have befallen me in the past year, but rather I stand before you as an example of one of the few lucky college students who has paid his way through college and somehow miraculously found work in the field I was interested in. But let me tell you what lucky looks like. I work 40 hours a week without a paid lunch break and without benefits. I pay about $400 a month in student loans. I'm lucky to only have $30,000 worth of debt, and I'll likely be paying that off for the next 20 to 25 years. Now you add about $500 for rent and electricity, add car insurance, health insurance, cell phone bills, and that's an easy $1,100 of my monthly paycheck that goes into my expenses. Did I mention that I make about $1,400 a month? Now adding gas for my car, food, and heaven forbid little things like toothpaste, coffee, and maybe the occasional beer, and I'm left in a very slowly sinking ship of financial debt. I'm constantly late on my bills. I can't afford to lose a day of work to go to the doctor to get a physical, or take a weekday off to get my errands done. Yet I still wake up every day and I count my blessings, because there are thousands of young college graduates like me whose ship has sunk. They can't find work at McDonald's, let alone at a great company doing what they love. Their problem is my problem, and it's all our problem. And our problem isn't one of individuals, but rather the system that we stand here in solidarity to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Wyatt. Now we're going to have Alex Fisher, who's going to read a testimony representing a migrant justice, and she's from Brattleboro.
Thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Alex Fisher, and I'm with a small group supporting the migrant justice organizing efforts that are based up in northern Vermont. I was invited to read this farm worker testimony by Migrant Justice because the worker was unable to travel here tonight. However, this is changing. Migrant workers are getting organized and mobilizing to the State House to defend their rights to freedom of movement and working for access to driver's licenses. Here is this person's statement. My name is Felipe Cervantes Martinez, and I lived in southern Vermont working on a vegetable farm as a migrant worker. I worked there for 6 years, starting in 2006. I am one of the workers that lasted the most time at the farm. Both Latinos and other American employees did not last long. Some came and went, others worked a couple of days a week, some lasting a couple of months, and then suddenly they would leave. I had some problems with housing on the farm. For example, the owner watered 3 greenhouses from the same pipe that provided water for my house. When there wasn't much rain on the farm and the greenhouses needed water, that's when I would have problems. The owner would water the 3 greenhouses using all the water, and when I returned to the house and wanted to shower, or to use the toilet, or cook, there was no water. All of these things require water, but the greenhouses used it all, so I couldn't. The longest I went without water was a week or 8 days. I told the owner about my problem, but he never fixed it. One of the biggest challenges I had while living on this farm was transportation. I could only go to the store once a week, and it was always with my employer. But sometimes, when I needed to send money to Mexico for a family emergency, or when I forgot something at the store, or if I needed something else, I couldn't go for a full week because my boss could not take me. I didn't have any time, and I could not find a taxi or someone to take me. So I would go for days like this, and those were some of the worst moments. I was working so hard to support my family so they could eat well, but here I couldn't take care of myself to go to the store when I needed to. I don't know exactly what was happening, but from June to August 6th this year, I never did receive my paycheck. I was owed 10 weeks of pay, and my employer only paid me a little bit. About $70 a week, and I was working 65 hours a week. I didn't like this at all, and that is when I started to want to leave and open a case with Migrant Justice's worker hotline, and I'm still waiting for a positive response to get my money back. I decided to leave the farm in August for blueberry and apple season. I knew I could make more money working elsewhere, but I could not leave because I did not have transportation, so I was just hanging in there and accumulating more weeks of unpaid work. Finally, I got some help and got a ride after a few weeks, and now I'm working elsewhere and awaiting a response about my back wages. I hope this will change and this abuse will stop just because we don't have papers or are unable to leave when we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. The next speaker we're going to have is Kate Curtis. And Kate Curtis is from Brattleboro and is part of the Vermont Early Educators United AFT.
My name is Kay Curtis. I moved to Brattleboro 12 years ago. When I looked around for work as a single mother, childcare in my home seemed like a great option. I am now in my 13th year of being an early educator. Happy Hands employs 4 teachers, and my school allows 15 families to go to work or college. Running a school is hard work, and it does not pay well, but it is very rewarding. I love being able to say I contribute daily to the well-being of families and children in my community. I have, however, over the years decided 3 times to close the school, and I have watched 1/3 of the women I admire in the field choose to do something else. These were great teachers who loved being with children. They gave up because they became exhausted by the system. Rules are set for us by well-meaning folk who sit at desks but have never stood in our shoes. Systems are put in place to promote quality, but providers have not had a voice at the table. It becomes frustrating, and then great teachers give up. 3 years ago, I was visited by an organizer from the Early Educators Union. "How is it going for you?" he asked me. Someone was interested in my point of view. This was a first. He told me that in 14 other states, early educators have organized to form unions. I think that children are too important and that being fed up with the system is not useful. I decided to work towards a positive outcome and build a union with other providers in Vermont. We have witnessed clear results from the process we have shared. Early educators in Vermont can now articulate clearly what is needed and why their work is so important to Vermont's future. We now believe it is possible for us to actively engage in bringing about positive change in our profession. We have been working with families to support affordable childcare and health care for all. I feel encouraged that the tide is shifting, but it is only because we are coming together to be heard. we are gaining political power. We need the right to organize our union, the same right that teachers, nurses, and firefighters have. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our first three speakers, Wyatt, Alex, and Kay. Let's give them a warm thank you. Before we hear the next three testimonies, I would like to talk a little bit about the Put People First Healthcare is a Human Right campaign. We have come together to and as well as with other collaborators as well. We have come together to call on our elected representatives to put people first. Each of our groups has taken an important struggle: the right to health care, the right to organize and to dignified work, the right to freedom of movement, the rights for people with disabilities. After last year's storm, everyone saw that people's needs and rights are directly impacted by climate change, which is why we are also uniting in claiming our right to a healthy environment and a livable planet. Together we stand for a unified vision of human rights and a government that meets our needs and the needs of future generations. To turn our vision into a reality, we need to make progress on important human rights issues in the coming legislative session, and we hope that you will stand with us on that. We also need to change the way our state raises and spends money. In our People's Budget campaign, we have worked together to demand that Vermont's budget and revenue policies meets people's fundamental needs, and that we allocate and raise the money based on those needs. We demand a budget process that is accountable to achieving this goal, and that includes a formal process of public participation. We demand that revenue policies are reviewed for their impact on the equity and their ability to fully fund people's needs. We commend the legislature for including a number of our initial demands in the budget bill last session. For the first time, Vermont statute now defines the purpose of the state budget to, quote, "The state budget should be designed to address the needs of the people of Vermont in a way that advances human dignity and equity, and spending and revenue policies recognize every person's need for health, housing, dignified work, education, food, Social Security, and a healthy environment." This is an important step forward, and we would like to hear from you how you will help make these requirements become a reality in this year's budget process. So we have a few more testimonies tonight before we move on to the candidates. I'd like to call up Safako Komumbo Pomei, and she is from Brattleboro and from VCIL, which is Vermont Center for Independent Living. It's fine.
Thank you. I'm Safako Kumabu Pomei from SIT, a student from Ghana. I'm doing my internship with Vermont Center for Independent Living. Before I came to SIT, the school got to know that I'm a disabled, so they built a special room for me before I came to the school. After 1 year, I have to go out to do my internship with an organization. So having lived in SIT Brattleboro here for 1 year, I thought accommodation would be very accessible for me in the downtown here, especially close to the workplace and especially close to the school, so that I can complete my program very easily. But unfortunately, I have been searching for accommodation, accessible accommodation from May up to now, and I've never gotten any room to live in as a disabled. I think accessibility to accommodation is a human rights issue. It is the government's responsibility for us to also have access to any building that we want to really live in as individuals, as disabled people. I think it is high time that the state, Vermont State, has some specialties towards accessible environment for students, especially international students. I have been searching since May up to now. Now I live in Putney with some church members, and I travel to work from Putney. Even as this evening, as we are having this program, I don't even know how I'm getting back to Putney, because the bus that I take goes back at 5:38. So after this program, it is a headache for me to get back home to the people that I've been living with. I've been on them for some time now, which is a trauma, which is an embarrassment, because they are not expecting me to live over the time span. So my issue is just one out of a lot out there, because there are so many international students out there who are not having access to accommodation. There are so many disabled people, people with disability, who have not yet got access to buildings. So this issue has to be tackled, and tackled with passion, tackled with really passion, so that we can also have access to every building that we want to. Thank you.
Thank you. The next up is Laura Evans. Laura Evans is also from Brattleboro, and she's from ASME, Vermont Home Care United.
Hello. I'd like to talk a couple minutes about my work as an elder care provider. I've done elder care for about 15 out of the last 20 years, sometimes full-time, but mostly part-time, along with childcare, my other profession. My first job in the field grew out of a very small house cleaning job for a then very self-sufficient woman I'll call Nancy. Over time, Nancy needed more help. Dementia became a problem for her, and it gradually grew worse, along with other health issues. Eventually, after several years, I was working full-time and was part of a small team of providers which I had set up. In the end, we were giving round-the-clock, very hands-on, end-of-life care under the supervision of a visiting nurse who came each week. After Nancy died peacefully there at home, for a few years I helped care for her sister-in-law, Betty, who was in her 90s. Then in a move I felt was unnecessary and unfortunate, her faraway family put her in a nursing home. Betty never adjusted to the drastic change, being removed from her home where she had lived for many decades. She was extremely upset and disoriented and stayed that way until after about a year she died. Currently, I help care for a woman I'll call Barb. Barb is passionately interested in a wide range of topics which she studies and informally teaches about in person to people who come to see her in her home, and by phone, and most often online. Many of her internet and telephone contacts would never dream that this extremely knowledgeable, vibrant woman is now nearly quadriplegic. I say nearly because she does have minimal use of one hand. She uses one finger to work on the computer and to press the speakerphone button to make and receive calls. She can't wash her own face or brush her hair. She loves cooking but can't do that either, like the Tai Chi, traveling, and gardening she used to enjoy so much. In the morning, Barb is lifted from bed to her commode and there to her electric wheelchair where she spends her day. From here, she communicates with people far and wide and directs her caregivers in taking care of her and of her much-loved garden and house, her wood stove, and the meticulous preparation of meals. In addition, we take care of the laundry, grocery shopping, and the other work of the household. Their needs require longer hours of caregiver help, to include at least dinner making and getting her safely into bed for the night, but the state is not paying for more time. Once when I was at Barb's house, there was a strange smell, and I was concerned about it, and Barb wasn't, and she called the gas company, and from the way she described it, they weren't concerned either, but I kind of pushed, and the gas company came that day and found that, yes, there was a propane leak. So I couldn't help thinking, what if that happens in the middle of the night? This is one of many possible examples that illustrate why Barb and her family member need more hours of care in order to be safe and prevent any possible disasters. If she didn't have us, her caregivers, there at all, what would happen to her, I asked myself. The only response I can think of is, she would die. There is no one else. The only other option would be a nursing home, and she told me she would literally prefer death. My guess is that that is what would be the outcome if she had to leave her home. It's not to say that some people don't have a great time in a nursing home, but this is what I think would not work for her. We providers do a public service that gives improved quality of life for people in need and in fact protects their lives, sometimes saving them. Just as firefighters and police keep our communities safe and secure, home care providers keep the lives safe and secure of some of the most needy but also productive members of our communities. Unlike those public service servants, home care providers do not presently have the right to form a union and to negotiate for better working conditions. We are not asking for special rights, just equal rights, as other workers have.
Thank you, Laura. Our next speaker is going to be Lynn Akey. Lynn Akey is from Brattleboro, and she's part of the Healthcare is a Human Right campaign.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Akey. I live in Brattleboro. I'm a member of the Vermont Workers Center and Put People's First campaign. And healthcare is a human right. I would like to thank you all for coming here tonight and taking the time to hear about our healthcare reform and how the members of Shumlin administration did not include dental and vision in our benefit packet. Well, I'm here tonight to say we want and need dental care in our universal health care coverage. This is about our quality of life. We can't afford not to have dental. Let's think about the meaning of the word universal. Refers to, applies to all, or as a whole. I believe our teeth are a part of our human body, a very important part of our body. In our society today, there is a huge concern with obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Dental is a serious concern, and proper dental benefit care should be in that packet. I was fortunate to have grown up being able to go to the dentist. I got my first cavity that was filled at the age of 18. I had beautiful teeth. As an adult, I had to go through having both hips replaced. The medication I was taking made my teeth break off at the gums. The end result was all my top teeth had to be pulled out. Not only physically, but also emotionally, I was devastated, which now caused the depression. Do you see where this is going? I personally see this going into a vicious cycle. So now, not being able to eat the fresh vegetables, fruits, and nuts, my bottom teeth were building up with plaque, which causes gingivitis and other gum diseases. Even though I go to the dentist twice a year, it's not enough. I need to go at least 2 or 3 or 4 times a year for cleaning, because I can't eat the healthy foods that prevent plaque buildup. Now let's talk about dentures. Dentures are not just for cosmetics. As the chewing of our food is the first step in proper digestion, and to be able to eat these healthy foods, vegetable, fruits, and nuts, our diet has a significant influence on our overall health, and the health of our teeth and gums can cause serious overall health risks. It took me 2 years to save enough money to buy dentures, and I went to affordable dental. So eating healthy, taking care of our bodies, will cut down on obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and depression. Adding these benefits will have positive effects of lowering state expenditures on health care and hospitalization, monetary statistics. Our voices need to be heard. We need to fight this next battle for dental and vision and get this into our universal health care coverage packet and put people first. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the last three testifiers of the evening. Thank you, Laura and Lynn. Those are wonderful testimonies. So all groups represented here at the forum, and many more, took a part in Vermont's first People's Convention for Human Rights, held on Labor Day weekend. The convention concluded with the signing of a Human Rights Declaration for Vermont, drafted and ratified by over 40 groups and over 400 individuals. Together, we created a joint vision for Vermont, and we would like to share a core statement of this vision with you today. Quote, "We hold in our hearts a vision of true democracy. It is a vision of society in which everyone enjoys a life of dignity, with health care, healthy food, and a home in a healthy environment. It is a society in which everyone has an education that allows them to fulfill their potential and their desires, with the meaningful work and adequate leisure. It is a society in which all decisions that affect our communities are made by and for the benefit of the people. A society which values the common good of this and the future generations over private gains. Our vision of true democracy is a vision of a society in which the principal role of government is to satisfy the needs of the communities by respecting, protecting, and fulfilling the human rights of every person." We will be working to make this vision a reality, and we're asking you to do the same. Our organizations have come together under the umbrella of Put People First. Let me be very clear about what we mean by that. We are emphasizing that it is a role of government to put the fundamental human needs and rights of all our residents and communities first. The state has an obligation to ensure that everyone can meet their needs and rights, including health care, housing, food, education, good jobs, Social Security, and a healthy environment. Government must seek to achieve dignity and equity among all residents. Now, candidates, getting to you now. I'm sure you're ready, right? So I'm going to ask you two related questions. I'm going to ask you to respond in one word, either yes or no. You will have more time to elaborate on your answers later, so don't be nervous. And I'm going to ask them now. And then I'm going to ask these two questions, and then I'm going to go through each of you and ask for your response. Do you believe that our state has an obligation to ensure that everyone can meet their fundamental human needs? Will you help develop budget and revenue policies that, as stated in the budget bill passed last session, raise and use public funds to meet people's needs and advance equity among Vermont residents? So I'll start with you, Rick.
Yes, yes.
Write-in candidate Mary Kane.
Definitely yes to both. Yes.
Rep. Molly Burke.
Yes to both.
Senator Jeanette White.
Yes, yes.
Rep. Tristan Tolino.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Rep. John. Rep. Dave. Dean.
Well, since I voted for the budget that contained that language, yes, and yes.
Libertarian Ian Diamondstone.
Liberty Union. Yes.
Liberty Union.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we've heard the yeses. It's a sweep of yeses. Right now we're going to have Ellen Schwartz. She's going to come up and ask you a little bit tougher questions. Okay? So Ellen.
Hi. Before I speak to the candidates, I just want to let people know that if you've written questions on those cards in front of you, if you hold up your card, Cindy will come by and pick it up. As we construct a society grounded in human rights, there are many building blocks that we must put in place. The groups assembled here have charted the next steps we need to take towards realizing our vision. You can help us in a very concrete way to take these steps in the upcoming legislative session. We ask you to support the right to organize, the right to health care, the right to freedom of movement, and the rights of people with disabilities. I'm going to read out 5 questions which are also on the poster board to your left. And shortly we're going to ask each of you to respond to each of these questions. You may find it helpful to use your note sheets as you think about each of the questions. So the first question is, will you support workers' rights to organize a union and bargain collectively, specifically early childhood educators and independent providers of home and community living services? Question 2. Will you support workers' rights to basic workplace protections, including paid sick leave? Question 3. Will you support equitable financing of health care as a public good and guarantee that everyone gets the medically necessary care they need, including dental care, and not limited by benefit restrictions? Question 4. Will you recognize all of our community's right to freedom of movement, regardless of people's immigration status, by supporting undocumented Vermont residents' equal access to driver's licenses and IDs? And 5, will you support adequate funding that meets the needs of people with disabilities, including new caseload dollars for developmental disability services? Please consider what you will do to help us put in place these building blocks that are needed to move toward a true democracy in which everyone can enjoy a life of dignity. Each of you will have 4 minutes to respond to this set of questions. And those of us in the audience will be using our note sheets to record your support for these issues. So remember to touch on all of them. The timekeeper will let you know when you have 30 seconds and when your time is up.
Candidate Ian Diamondstone.
What a perfect way to begin.
We got 5 questions.
This is my first political forum ever, so I think it's appropriate that we start here. Will I support workers' rights to organize a union? My grandfather was proud to say that he worked in a union shop for 53 years, and it was what the American dream was built on, and I would support the rights of workers to organize no matter what their profession or whatever field it is that they're in. Will I support workers' rights to basic workplace protections? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I would definitely support workers' rights because I'm one of those workers, and I'd certainly want my rights protected. Financing of health care as a public good, it should be a public good. It is definitely a right of every citizen of the United States, of the world as far as I'm concerned, to get equal health care. It should be first. As far as I'm concerned, everyone should be entitled to any form of health care that they choose, and the payment should be an afterthought, not something that's thought of beforehand. Actually, while I'm on this topic, would everyone in the room with health care, with insurance, raise their hands? Okay. Well, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if I have health care because I was unemployed recently for a short time, and I went on the Vermont State program, and I receive 4 to 5 letters a week, and I honestly do not know if I have health care or not. And I have my master's degree, and I have trouble figuring out, so I can't imagine what it's like for people to get through the forms, to get through the state, to figure out what they need to do in order to get that health care. I think it's actually almost criminal that anyone in the state of Vermont, or in the world really, that they don't have adequate health care. Freedom of movement. Is there even a question? Of course, everyone should have the freedom of movement regardless of their immigration status. Will you support adequate funding that meets the needs of people with disabilities? Again, not just with disabilities, but again, everyone deserves an equal right to funding that meets all of their needs. Everybody deserves a warm home to live in, a roof over their house, food, and health care. I don't even think I need the 4 minutes to complete answering those 5 questions.
Thank you, candidate.
All right, going down the questions, right to organize. 2 things. First off, and I may be the only one up here who has ever been a business agent for a local, but I was with Service Employees International back a ways when I was more an organizer than I am now. And over 22 years of service in the Vermont House and Senate, I still maintain a 100% voting record for organized labor. The second question, I've mentally related to the first question, and if people have the right to organize, normally one of the things they bargain for is health care coverage. So do you want a law to sort of intervene with that bargaining? And that's an issue with some of the unions around the state right now, whether or not there's automatic enrollment in the Green Mountain health care plan, or can they continue to bargain for health care? So if you're organized, in my opinion, you have a right to bargain for health coverage. Should it become law and override that bargaining right? I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. Equitable financing of health care is a public good. Yes. That's all I have to say about that. Yes. Freedom of movement for undocumented residents. I am confused by the term, and maybe I ought to know better, but I don't. I still would have concern about illegal entry into the United States with intention to do harm. Now, I don't know enough about people moving in and out. If someone comes here and they're undocumented and they're working at a farm, as one of the witnesses testified, that person certainly ought to be able to move around this state since they are providing a service to us here in Vermont. Meeting the needs of people with disabilities through fully funding. I don't mean to split hairs, folks, but I've heard that phrase a lot. Whose definition of fully? And what kind of funding are you talking about? And, okay, if it's transportation, then we'll talk about transportation. And having people being able to get around, and the woman who is going to have trouble getting back to Putney shouldn't have trouble getting back to Putney for participating in a public event like this. But, so, it's just too sweeping for me to just up and say yes. It just needs some further definition, or I need to understand further what fully funded means. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. John Moran.
Is all right? First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I also want to thank you for all coming up to the State House when you do. Your presence makes a lot of difference in terms of our convincing our fellow legislators who are not so friendly towards some of the causes, whether it's the early educators coming up there, whether it's the people with disabilities coming up there, whether it's the healthcare, the human rights people coming up there. It has been a very strong, your presence has been very strong in terms of getting things done. Because the one thing, the way you get things done in the legislature is bodies show up and say, we want these things done. So I'm glad that your commitment. I was at the convention in Labor Day, and there was obviously a great turnout for that convention. In many ways, I feel at home being here. I feel at home because when I go to meetings for the Vermont Council for Independent Living, or when I go to the meetings for the self-advocates especially, I enjoy. The self-advocates show up at the State House so many times, and I get the chance to introduce them on the floor of the House, and it's a real pleasure to have them, the Green Mountain self-advocates there, and also to have the healthcare, the early childhood care workers there too. I wanted to just briefly touch on the whole concept of the people's budget, because we have a presidential candidate right now who's written off half the population because they have the outrageous demand that they're entitled to health care, food, and housing. And to me, this is an election about the proper role of government, and I think you have it correct. This is what it's all about. And the proper role of government, I think in some senses, we have to look at the way we do budgets to start with. The standard way is you start with a certain amount of money and then you try to divvy it up. That is not what I think the people's budget will be about. The people's budget will be about what is the proper role of government, and once we establish that, then how do we fund it? And that may mean that we have to re-look at the whole process of who pays for the funding of our services. And maybe it's time for a more equitable funding system where those who have more make a fair share into the budget process. So we got to get it right. We got to first of all decide what is the proper role of government, and then we have to decide how to do the funding for that. I looked at these 7 lists here, the answer is yes to all of them. And it's not so much what we're going to do for many of us, it's what we have been doing and we will continue to do. When Wyatt from Halifax talked about having to work without a lunch break, I spent 2 days on the House floor being pummeled by some non-friendly people who thought it was outrageous that we were asking that you don't work 6 hours without at least a break. That was called the break bill, and it finally did get through the House. But it was a lot of resistance, that people actually thought you were supposed to work for a day without a break. Or the fact that he also mentioned that he can't take a day off to go to get a physical because he can't afford it. Well, we fought in the legislature, many of us, for paid sick leave. And we will continue to fight for that because that is crucial. It's crucial for single moms. It's crucial for the whole issue of holding a job and also not sending your kid to school who's sick or not going to work when you're sick. So when Kay, I've had the pleasure of seeing your center, and it was a wonderful place to visit, talks about the early childhood educational bill. We fought very hard for that. And again, your presence there made a big deal about us fighting for it and having it passed through the House. Unfortunately, it didn't make it this year. But many of these bills I'm talking about, I hope you will continue to pressure and bring us back to us because we will work to get these things done. As I said before, it's wonderful to Laura, who has both the experience of working with the elderly and working with children. What a wonderful combination of having the process of working with both of those. The healthcare as a human rights, obviously, your campaign is what's made it possible. And I, too, am concerned about the lack of dental in there. We have to look at that process to make sure it works out correctly. I'm the chair of the vice chair of Labor Committee that also looks at housing and also looks at the livable wage budget. I'm also the co-chair of the Working Vermonters Legislative Caucus, and we look at legislative issues that affect working Vermonters. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. John Moran. Kristen Tolino.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. I would say that right off the top, I think all 5 of these questions point to aspirations that we have for what our community should be like, what our state should be like, what our government should be like, how we should behave, how we should sort of talk and define what the future of Vermont looks like. And I think they all point to worthy goals, and I support all of the goals. There are details, some of which I'm sure I'm going to get a chance, if I get elected in November, to learn all of the sort of details, the challenging choices that have to be made, the trade-offs that have to be made on some of these issues. But I do want to hit a couple of specific points. On paid sick leave, many of you probably know that I come from the food service industry, and the food service industry is not exactly well known as being a friendly place for sick leave, which is ironic because of the number of people who are potentially at risk from food service workers being sick. But we have a cultural problem, not just a legal problem in the food service industry. So, I'm very interested in understanding what choices have to be made there, recognizing that for many small mom and pop style independent food service establishments, laws that work very well to protect workers' rights often work very well for chains and don't work very well for small independents, and it ends up reinforcing the competitive advantage that large chains have. And those chains don't necessarily contribute to the community equally in the big picture, but in terms of their competitive balance, it can actually reinforce their ability to run small businesses into the ground. So I want to be aware of that dynamic while I support the goal. And that's an example of where I think there are trade-offs that have to be made. In terms of the healthcare, I think we're hopefully all incredibly passionate supporters of universal healthcare. With respect to dental care, I think one of the issues that I'm particularly aware of, having had several employees over the years that had some severe dental issues, is that there's not just sort of the health and wellness issue of dental care, but there's a job equity issue. It's very hard for people who have had a lifetime of poor dental care to find employment. It's one of the most discriminated classes of people in the job market, and that's a real equity issue. It has to be addressed. If we don't address it in universal health care, we're really consigning a group of people who haven't had this access throughout their lives to have trouble accessing good paying jobs. In terms of the migrant worker issue, I think actually there's a whole range of farm labor issues that the state faces. This is just one of them. I'm certainly in favor of freedom of movement, and I think we also need to look at how in the future Vermont can have a labor force on its farms that support our goals of a strong local and vibrant agriculture, but also fair work, fair labor practices, and sort of a strong community around the agricultural community. And lastly, in terms of the developmental disability services, I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure what those three words mean, what's missing, but I do have a lot of experience as an employer working with disabled employees, and I'm very aware of the need for assistance for them with their caseworkers of finding access to jobs, but I'm also aware of the fact that without a really strong local job economy, it's also very hard for some people to get dignified work and to find access to places where they can improve their skills. So that's an issue for me going forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. Senator Jeanette White.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. First of all, I should say that I have a basic agreement with all of these positions. As we like to say, though, the devil is in the detail. And the way things happen is that an issue is taken up, and then you have to debate that issue. And even people who agree on the basis of have the same values sometimes disagree on how to implement it and how to get there. So picking up on what David Bean said, is that it isn't always just let's do this or let's do this. We have to look at the details, and we have to weigh all of those, and then we have to come to some kinds of conclusions. So while underneath I basically agree with all of these, I don't know the details of any of them exactly enough yet, because I don't know what will be introduced this year. In terms of, I'm going to just talk a little bit about each of these. In terms of the workers' right to organize, I absolutely think that it's a right. My dad was a family farm organizer, and I grew up with unions all my life. I will say that I do not believe that health care should be a bargaining issue. I think that health care should not be connected to your employment. It should be a right that everybody has by virtue of being a resident of Vermont, not a bargaining unit or a bargaining issue. Workplace protection, I do agree with that we all need to have safe places to work, places that honor us, and that we can work to our potential. So paid leave, all of that, I think it needs to happen. Again, I don't know the details. Healthcare financing, I do think that we all have should all have access to it, and it should be equitable. It should be financed through the ability to pay, both by employers, through a payroll tax probably, and not for their employees, but for everybody, and by an income tax, a graduated income tax. And dental, vision, and we don't have up here mental health. That's also a very crucial part of healthcare. So when it comes down to how are we going to provide all of them, they may have to be gradually added. I don't know, because I don't know what the financing scheme will look like, and we need to look at that. I don't want us to tank the whole healthcare reform by biting off more than we can chew right away. So I'm hoping that we can do dental, I'm hoping we can do vision, and I'm hoping we can do mental health. Freedom of movement, the bill that would have given driver's licenses to undocumented dairy workers. It really isn't undocumented residents. It was aimed at undocumented dairy workers. It was my bill. I introduced it, and I saw it through the Senate Agriculture Committee, and it ended up coming to the Transportation Committee, and I think Molly will probably say what's happening with it now, but that was my bill. I do believe it. Yes to the end, but it's all a matter of balance. Vermont is one of the five states with the most progressive tax policies in the country. So we already have a very progressive tax base. Those who can pay more. Those who can't, pay less. And maybe there's something we can do at the top end. I'm not sure that there's anything we can do at the bottom end. But if we're going to fund everything, and again, I don't know what fully means, but if we're going to fund everything, we have to balance it, and we have to look at where the money's coming from. Thank you.
Representative Molly Burt.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I really like the idea of thinking of all these ideas as how do we sort of change the culture in our society, and how do we think about things that maybe have been almost taboo topics. Oh, well, we can't do that, or we can't do that. And it is really wonderful to think about moving in this direction. And I think I want to agree with Jeanette that the devil is in the details, but if we have this sort of blueprint in front of us, then we can move forward. Specifically, on the right to organize union collective bargaining, that was a basic component of creating a strong middle class in our country. And if unions have become sort of people have had a negative opinion about unions, but they have created the kind of prosperous society that we used to have. Paid sick leave is a very complicated thing. I think one of the things we need to talk about is how about self-employed people, of which I have been one and am one. It gets to be, how do you provide for everybody? But I basically agree that, yes, we should have paid sick leave. I think it's unconscionable that somebody should have to worry about whether they're going to leave their sick child home alone and go to work because they can't get off. And so basically I totally agree with that. Equitable financing of health care is a public good, including dental. I know from personal experience how expensive dental work is. I don't know how I think that, as Jeanette said, how do we move in that direction, given how we're trying to take the steps to move into universal health care. And I have been a strong supporter of universal health care, single payer, knowing, again, as a self-employed person, how difficult, living pretty much all my life with little or no health insurance or inadequate health insurance. Freedom of movement for undocumented residents. Jeanette brought the bill for driver's licenses for migrant workers to the fore, and it came to our committee, Transportation Committee, and at that point it became a bill to create a study committee to look at all the issues, and I presented that bill on the floor because I was very, very strongly in favor and interested in it. I am now on that study committee. We have met twice. We're looking at all the complexities of the issues of how do we do this. 2 other states have done it already, New Mexico and Washington State, and we are in the process. There are a diverse group of people on the committee, including representatives of the Vermont Farm Bureau and the Department of Agriculture and the Public Service, Public Safety, and the Vermont Commission on Human Rights. So that's been a very interesting conversation, and it's been really important to have a number of, it's wonderful to be in the State House and see a group of young Latino farm workers coming in and advocating for themselves, and sort of creating a little cultural diversity in our state. And I know that they've been extremely important to the success of the dairy industry. In fact, the dairy industry half of the dairy industry is supported by migrant labor. So that's a very important issue for the whole state. I'm on the Transportation Committee. I asked to be on the Public Transit Advisory Board, which we do meet 4 times a year to talk about access, trying to improve our public transit system in the state, which includes people with disabilities. I have met several times with the Vermont Center for Independent Living about transportation issues. It's something that I feel strongly about and will continue to support. I also want to say that I'm glad that climate change is part of the coalition and part of this whole conversation. And Val Stewart wanted to be here tonight, but she's out of town. Thank you.
Writing candidate Mary Kane.
Some of you may already recognize me because I was fortunate to go with the Vermont Workers Center several times to advocate for the age 9-7 unionization, child education unionization bill. I'm excited to be here tonight because this is my first time also, Ian, so you're not alone. And if you can't hear me, please let me know. I did want to touch on a couple of issues that spoke to me about these 5 areas. I'm a single mom now, but I was part in California where sick pay was paid for, and I had my maternity leave paid for. I was also, like Tristan had said, I have a food and beverage background, so for me that was an enormous asset not to have to worry that I was going to lose my job because I was pregnant. And I have met several people when I've been out campaigning who have gone back to work after 2 weeks of having a child. I think that's outrageous, and we can do better than that here in Vermont. I especially want to talk to people with disabilities, my dear friend Sifakor, who I admire greatly, from Ghana, who is a shining light, who I met at the May 1st rally in Montpelier, really, truly has broken through barriers and will continue to fight for individuals in our area to advocate to get better abilities for our disabled folks. I want to also speak to the fact about I had the opportunity to be in the Workers Center conference up in UVM, where we heard an undocumented worker and what happened to him. And it made an impact on me because I've had an opportunity to work in Chicago and Los Angeles, where I have worked with mucho persona who habla español, and it is mucho necessary for us to have Spanish in our agencies here in Vermont. I saw it today where an individual who has Spanish as a first language could not understand the the worker who was trying to give information to them in English. We need to have more of that. That's really a key area, and if we don't have it, it is a problem for not only our farm workers, but for other individuals who are here whose languages are Spanish. As well as I am thrilled to pieces beyond what I can tell you. It is a pleasure and a delight that you have accepted and brought in American Sign Language. For 2 whole years, I have advocated to have more meetings like this to include our deaf community with American Sign Language interpreters, so thank you so much for that. I think that I haven't covered everything. As a new legislator, if I am elected, I am, as I have said many times before, there is nothing different about us. We all bleed the same color blood, regardless of our economic situation, and I would welcome the opportunity to represent you wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody for coming here. It's nice to see some familiar faces. My name is Mike Morwicki. I'm from Putney, and I appreciate your work here. As somebody who's worked as a child care worker with Laura Evans at Putney Daycare when it was a workers' collective, I appreciate what you bring here. I'm glad to see Doug Avery here. Is he still here? If you don't know Doug and his work with the farm workers here, talk to him. He understands this as well as anybody. I'm the last one to speak, so I can just say, yeah, I agree with everybody here. You're not going to hear much dissent here. And I want to tell you a little bit about the values that inform those decisions, though. And today's John Lennon's birthday, or it would have been. As somebody who's been dedicated to social justice, as a musician, these are where my values come from. Social justice, peace, equity. These inform my decisions. So if you want to know about me or any of us, I think our values that underlie that are where this comes from. So that's why I wanted to mention that, and then I can go into specifics now. State obligation to ensure people's needs are met. I agree with this. We're a country that should and could do better, and we will. A people's budget. I agree with this, and many of us do. In fact, in the last legislature, not only did we put out the idea that the budget should be created this way, but how we gauge what we do will be looked at differently when we created the genuine progress indicators. We're not just going to look at how much money we earned to judge our success, but we're going to look at how people are treated, how the environment is treated. We're going to look at a complex array of factors and indicators that will indicate genuine progress, whether we are or not, and how we can do better. Right to organize a union and collective bargain. I come from a union family. I recently found out all of my grandparents came from Poland. One of them came to work in the coal mines of West Virginia and was there when the Battle of Blair Mountain was being fought in around 1920. So those are my union roots. Of course, I continue to support them. Right to paid sick leave. This is especially important for families. And family leave, I hope, is what you mean by this as well as just individual sick leave. It's so essential for parents to be able to take time off to take care of children, to take care of their parents. So family leave is something that I certainly agree with. Equitable financing of health care. I think we need to, I believe we need to have diverse funding streams, but I'd like to go on record right here that one of them should be a tax on soda. Should be a tax on sugar. These things we know are direct contributors to ill health, and we should be helping to pay for our health care with this as well. Freedom of movement for undocumented residents. I believe we need to give more credit for people from out of this country who come to do the work that a lot of Americans won't do anymore. American agriculture would not exist without workers from other countries. And I certainly support their right to move freely about. And I support us giving them more credit and helping see that their lives are better. Meeting the needs of people with disabilities. I work on the House Human Services Committee. The House Human Services Committee takes care of, it's the largest agency we have. Specifically, though, there are 3 areas that I think are as important as anything. One is taking care of young children, one is taking care of our elders, and the other is taking care of the disabled. These are people without a voice. It's our job, it's my job to be their voice. I appreciate having that opportunity and look forward to being that voice for them, for you, in the next legislature. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all of you, for humoring me with the mic as it passed around. I know that wasn't the most convenient. So let's just give another round of applause for all of our candidates. They were very articulate. So thank you all for your responses. And now with the remaining time, we would like to finish out the night by taking questions from the audience. The candidates, we're going to be collecting those index cards, so if any of you have questions from the audience, again, Ellen and Cindy, raise your hand. Ellen's over here. Cindy's in the back, so if you still have questions, please get your card to Cindy or raise your hand and she'll get it to you. We are going to spend the remaining time, except for the last 5 minutes, so for about the next half an hour or so, we're going to spend, Ellen's going to, would you like to read or you want? It's probably easier because I Okay, so Ellen's going to read the question, and if it's directed towards a specific candidate, which most of them should be, she'll ask that candidate the question. You will have 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes to respond. Feel free, if you don't need the 2 minutes, to not use it all, but you'll have up to 2 minutes, and Kate, again, will be graciously supplying us with those time cards. Thank you.
To have respond to it. So the first question is for David Dean, and the question is, will you vote for the legislation to allow child care providers to choose to form a union?
That passed out of the House.
Yeah, we passed it out of the House, so the answer is yes, and I already have it. Can I ask a question? How many are registered to vote? How many voted in the last election? All right.
These are people.
Okay, the next question is for Jeanette White. Would you support Vermont's going on record in support of the ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities?
Probably. I haven't read it. I don't really know what it says, but it sounds like I probably reasonably would support it.
Thank you. Our next question is for Molly Burke. Sidewalks in Brattleboro are nearly impossible to navigate by a stroller or wheelchair, and many buildings do not have ramps or elevators. Why and what can be done about it?
Not an easy question to answer. Money comes for sidewalks, some of it comes through the state. There are different funding sources. Towns can apply for grants, for enhancement grants. Sometimes towns are spending the money themselves. It all comes down to budgetary priorities. One of the ways to sort of advocate for this is through the town, through the select board, and also through the Regional Planning Commission. Regional Planning Commission, which is the Windham Regional Planning Commission, sets sort of priorities for funding for transportation projects in the region, and that is one avenue to go through to advocate for a particular kind of thing. I think if we were to deal with all the problems with sidewalks or lack of sidewalks, that's a huge undertaking. So I think it's going to require some kind of prioritization. In terms of transportation, we don't really deal with the, I don't really know much about sort of elevator accessibility laws. Maybe somebody else does.
Okay, the next question is for Tristan Tolino. Will you support the right of early educators in such a way as to influence other politicians in Montpelier?
Well, I'll do my best. If I get elected, I'll obviously be a newbie, and my influence will be somewhat constrained. But I certainly believe that the early educators should have a right to unionize. I think that there's this is a sort of a big part of the informal Vermont economy, and it needs to be more formal, and it needs to be valued and appreciated and supported for the role that it does play in our kids' lives.
Great, thank you. Next is for Senator Wyatt. What will you do about the cost of child care for families?
It's part of the budgeting process. I personally am not on the Appropriations Committee. I haven't been in the past, but I certainly think we need to increase the reimbursement system for early childhood providers, early childhood educators. Sorry, Kay. And I'll do my best to make sure that that's a priority. I'm not on the Appropriations Committee, so all I can say is that I'll do my best to make sure that it's recognized for its importance and funded appropriately.
Thank you. Okay, next is for Representative Burke. Can you talk about what the state is doing to support affordable, reliable mass transportation, non-vehicular and physically disabled supportive forms of transportation? And what do you anticipate the state will do in the coming legislative session? So one part is, what is the state currently doing? And then what do you anticipate they'll do in the coming session to support affordable, reliable mass transportation?
One of the reasons I wanted to be on the Transportation Committee is because I really believe we need to have a multimodal transportation system, and we need to cut our transportation greenhouse gases. The state, actually, there is quite, given the rural nature of Vermont, there is actually, it's not perfect, but quite a good regional transportation system. And we are at the Public Transit Advisory Council and at the Agency of Transportation working on creating better connectivity between trains and buses and park and rides and buses and things like that. If you live in Chittenden County and you travel to Montpelier, there's very good commuter service in the state. It's a little harder, the issue with intercity bus service, which means like the Greyhound service, that if you wanted to get to Springfield, Massachusetts, or if you needed to get to Burlington, longer distance, it's become harder. And the state, for example, Greyhound was going to pull out of the state. There's one trip a day service, and the state stepped in to subsidize that service and sending out requests for proposals to be able to keep that going. So the state has a strong interest in keeping and improving our public transit system. I don't know if I've answered the question. That's what we're doing, and we have 30 seconds, so I think that'll just continue. And I must say that the Shumlin administration has been very supportive of that as part of the overall goal about reducing emissions. And there was a big change in the transportation department with the advent of the Shumlin administration about alternative forms of transportation.
Thank you. Okay, next is for Senator Wyatt. I think because you represent the whole county, you get a lot of questions. Are you willing to go to bat for coverage in the universal health care bill for supports for dental and eye care? Please explain.
Yes, I am willing to go to bat for it. I don't know when the appropriate time or how it is phased in. And I know that this isn't going to be a popular answer, but we do have to look at how we're phasing in what we're doing with health care. And we need to cover dental, vision, and mental health care. And they're all three important. And I think that the trick is going to be to make sure that we do them in a way that is sustainable so that we don't end up killing that along with the entire healthcare reform bill. So yes, I think it's absolutely crucial when it goes in, when it's phased in. I don't know about that. I think that's again, the details have to be worked out, but I do support all three of those, and I will continue to support them.
Thanks. The next is a two-part question, and it's a similar question, but for a different candidate. This is for Tristan Tolino. And the first question is, would you try and support the health insurance from the state of Vermont for working people for eye care and dental? And the second is, would you support paid sick leave for home care providers?
Yes on both. You know, I'm really glad Jeanette brought up the mental health. I was blanking there for a minute. Mental health care as something that needs to be covered. I have somebody who's very close to me, who's worked with me for many years, who really has been somewhat stuck in Vermont because Vermont is progressive enough to have good mental health care coverage for him for his medicine, and he has a relative down in a southern state who makes a fair amount of money who has been arguing with him about Obamacare and whether it's, you know, all the terrible dastardly things that it does, who also has 2 children with serious prescription needs for mental health care, doesn't know what the real cost of that is. And he said, my meds, if I had to pay for them myself, are almost $10,000 a year. And without those, his ability to work is really constrained. So he's been sort of stuck in Vermont. It's a good thing he likes Vermont and he likes working with me and I like working with him. But you know, these are real issues, and we've got to find a way to deal with them and to fund them and to make sure that they're a priority for the state. Vision care for sure. Dental care, I think I already spoke a little bit about why I see that as so important. And then there was one other thing that Ian said that I thought is really worth noting, which is that once you're in the system and trying to get access to the care, there's just an unbelievable amount of paperwork that comes with staying in the system. And I'm outside looking in, wondering why on earth did we set it up to assume that we're so afraid of fraud that we have to make people fill out multiple forms every other week or every month to try to prove that they belong. I think it's an implicit judgment on the citizens of Vermont that's unnecessary.
Thank you. Cindy, are there any more cards? Okay, I have one card here from, I don't know who the person is because we didn't ask people to put their names on, but it was a question that really wasn't about legislation. It was more about trying to get some help with something. So I would encourage the person who submitted that card, if you didn't hear your question raised, to talk to one of the legislators after the hearing, and they can sort of put you in touch with Jeanette's nodding her head. They can put you in touch with the right place to get support with the issue that you're trying to get support with. So no other questions before I pass it back to Sheila?
Can I just say something about the budget process?
Why don't you grab the mic?
You know, I wanted to follow up on what Jeanette said. Because I don't think any of us here are on the Appropriations Committee, which does the budget in the House or in the Senate. But the way the process works, you have influence and we have influence as well too. And I just want to let you know where you can weigh in on this. The budget starts with the governor. He proposes it. He sends it over to the House Appropriations Committee. And it starts in the House because we have more members. There's 150 House members. We have more people we can put on committees. But then it goes to each committee of jurisdiction where they take testimony about how that budget proposal will affect the people that they hope it will serve. So that's where all of you have some influence. And talk to us, talk to other people in the various areas where you think you'd like to have some influence on that. And I think then we go through a very 2-month-long process. You know, out of the 4 months we're in session, the biggest piece of that is working on the budget. And the House debates it, votes it, sends it over to the Senate. So there's another opportunity for people to weigh in with the various Senate committees. So you do have a lot of opportunity to weigh in on the budget, and just like we do. But and we listen to you. You know, I'm going to remind people that we listen to voters, and I saw just about every hand go up. We listen to you because you know we're there to work for you. And in Vermont, I think it works better than anywhere.
Thank you.
Are we going to have a chance to say something before we finish? Or what's your agenda for
No.
Because there are a couple of questions you raised, I'd like to comment if I may.
Okay, so what I'll do is we'll take the next few minutes. Are there any other questions out in the audience? So we're going to just take a few minutes for any candidates who were not called upon who would like to touch base on any of the questions asked. How does that sound? And we'll start with John Moran.
Thank you. In terms of union organizing, I failed to mention that I am a union member, and as a matter of fact, I helped form a union, HCRS, United Nursing and Allied Healthcare Professionals. So I definitely do support union organization. But on the healthcare bill, to me, I am a mental health worker. I do work in the field, and as far as I'm concerned, if mental health is not included in the bill, that's a killer, because parity is the whole issue that we have fought for in this state. I do definitely support dental and vision service, but to me, it's a no-brainer. Mental health will be part of the healthcare system, or I will have a lot of problems with it. Thank you.
Anybody, any of the other candidates want to respond who haven't had a chance to speak?
I just want to say that you may know that I was one of the members who had a tooth taken out in the United Way Dental Day. Because of the crisis, I lined up with everyone else. There was about maybe 100 and some of us early in the morning. It was an extraordinary experience. I had a tooth pulled out that day, and I am a firm believer that we need to do far more in the dental care area. In 1996, I was part of a survey that at that point here in Vermont we had a critical need for dental care, and now we're at a crisis need for dental care, and I don't think we can do enough to include this in the healthcare issue. The particular dentist that took my tooth out owns 5 dental clinics, and we can do more to attract individuals to help our population that cannot afford that. I think that's really critical. And I also wanted to touch on one more thing. I was also a part of the NEA, which is the National Education Association union, and I saw how powerful they were in assisting in different areas, and I think that it's critical, especially in childcare. Having had 3 children here, and I am blessed, I cannot say enough great things about the childcare that I received, and the ability to keep me working while my kids were in great daycare. So, Kate, I really, my heart goes out to all daycare workers for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other candidates would like to respond to any of the questions that were raised? Going once. Going twice. Okay. So this is the wrap-up portion of the program. So you've heard about some of the unmet needs we live every day. This is not a definite or conclusive list, but it is grounded in the testimonies you heard this evening. People don't get the health care they need today and won't in the exchange. People are hungry and homeless. People live in poverty. People work for less than livable wages because their right to organize is impinged on. People are denied access to the communities around them, to live where they want to live, just because there is no funding to meet their needs. People cannot move around as they need to, just because they don't have access to transportation and they are not treated as equals before the law. People's needs are unmet, their rights unfulfilled. So the solution, but we are hopeful. We know we are a state where we can change this. We are a state where we come together to solve problems. We know the solution is within our grasp, and we will work with others and you to put these solutions in place. We resolve to have our right to organize and dignified work fulfilled. We resolve to ensure equal treatment for everyone, including immigrants and people with disabilities. We resolve to have our right to health care fulfilled in a universal, publicly financed health care system. We resolve to address the climate crisis and take action to ensure our right to a healthy environment. And we resolve to set a budget process that raises and spends our money in a way that meets the needs of the people and advances equity. We believe the human rights principles we've talked about this evening should guide us in our policy decisions. So before I close out, I would like all of you to, I hope that the candidates will stick around for as much time as that they're able to stick around and to mingle with their constituents, that you will enjoy refreshments over to the side, that you will visit our table and tablers in the back that are from many of the collaborators and hosts of this evening, and that you will hopefully, if you haven't signed in, to please sign in. And there is a yellow postcard in the back, if everybody looks at Kate back there. We hope that you will come back and sign a yellow postcard that's going to be delivered to whoever's in our State House this coming year that's supporting many of the issues that we discussed here today. So I'd just like to finish by closing that I heard somewhere that our budget reflects our priorities. So I just want to say that one more time. Our budget reflects our priorities. How many of you in this room agree to that? Raise your hand. What about candidates? Yeah, we agree. We heard that around the table, right? So as we're leaving today, and as the candidates are thinking about their choices and how they will work in the State House around our budget, whether they're on appropriations or not, let's have a budget that really reflects our priorities. So candidates, if you win your election in November, we will see you in the State House and in meetings here in our communities. We will work with you to rebuild our democracy and fulfill our human rights. You're not alone. We want to let you know that you have a whole room full of people in here and out there who will support you in making these decisions. You are absolutely not alone. We will continue to hold forums like this one as we have in the past. So please, each of you, raise your questions to your candidates at the end, and we invite you to stay and to mingle. Good night, everyone, and remember to put people and the planet first.
Just one thing before you go. My name is Rich Boucher. I'm from Council 3797, ASME of Windham County, Windham and Windsor County, and we came down here tonight to show support for the healthcare and the child care workers in order to organize. And you have our support. We have over 100 members that are supporting you entirely on your venture.
Thank you.